DND number 3, Finding Home in Jesus' Name, Chapter 14. You suck, Evan mumbled as he tossed a $5 bill on the table. Next, Chaz announced with a grin. Evan willingly tossed his pool cue to Josh and made his way to the bar. Chaz eyed his new opponent, the proclaimed county pool champion. Get ready to have your handed to you. You talking mighty big there, fella, Josh crooned, like a man who's in love. Next in line, Troy chuckled, eyeballing Chaz. I'd say you hit that right on, Josh, judging from the look on his face. Shut up and let me break, Chaz said to Josh. Yep, Troy continued. There's nothing like being in love with a gorgeous redhead to boost a man's confidence. How would you know? Josh wheedled back at Troy, amongst toots of laughter. Chaz gave the cue ball a stout whack and watched as it scattered the brightly colored balls and then dropped neatly into the corner pocket. Josh grinned as he moved to the table and began sinking one ball after another. Chaz never got back in the game. He ate his humble pie, real sportsmanlike, laid a 5 on the table, and moved to join Evan at the bar. Hey, Joe, Chaz said, as he took a seat next to his friend. Back at you, Joe answered. He placed a bottle of beer on the bar. Business looks good. The place is jumping. Got a lot new faces. Going to be more of that once Lisa gets things going. I'm looking forward to it. Going to be doing some renovating of my own. Really? What do you got in mind? I'm going to make a complete split of the restaurant section and expand the bar and then add some video games and play up the rustic country theme. Does Lisa know what you're planning? Not yet, but I'm sure once I tell her, she'll have plenty of ideas to input and expound on. I'm sure she will, Chaz said, smiling at the thought of her. Would you like more wine? Glenn asked, smiling cunningly. Lisa put her hand to her forehead. No, I haven't finished what I have. And actually, I'm not feeling very well. Giving her head a shake, she winced. I think I'd better be going home. Glenn's pulse jumped. It was really working. He could feel his excitement build, but he probably needed at least another 15 minutes before he could offer to take her home. Of course, he wouldn't really be taking her home. He would be taking her around to his room on the back side of the motel, where Marcus was already waiting. What's wrong? Do you have a headache? No, I feel a little dizzy, a little queasy. I hope you're not coming down with something. Me too. I have a lot to do tomorrow. He frowned. Man, I just hate that the last time we get to see each other, you get sick. Doesn't that just figure? Maybe you're allergic to me, he said with a laugh. Lisa smiled. Don't be silly. Glenn's eyebrows rose at the slurring of her speech. Maybe he wouldn't need another 15 minutes after all. Why not? Let's be silly, Lisa. Remember when we used to be silly and do all sorts of crazy things? Lisa laughed and leaned forward. You mean before you messed around with my mother? That was funny too, wasn't it, Lisa? Seeing the look on your face when I pulled out my gun. Now that was funny. Glenn rose and went to her side. Hey, hon, are you okay? She nodded her head. It's warm in here, isn't it? Maybe a little. Is she sick? Glenn eyed the waitress, who'd pretty much ignored him all night. Why did she have to butt in now? I think she's had a little too much to drink, Glenn answered. It's warm in here, isn't it? Lisa asked the waitress. Glenn put his arm around her and lifted her to her feet. Come on, sweetheart. I guess I need to take you home. He handed the waitress a 20. I think that'll cover it. Lisa leaned heavily on Glenn as they made their way out of the bar. Opening the passenger side door, he let her slump into the seat, then lifted her legs and swung them into the car. The door made a pleasant-sounding thump, he thought, with his cargo tucked neatly inside. He ran around and settled behind the wheel for the very short trip. A minute later, he pulled up in front of his motel door, turned off the engine, and turned toward Lisa. Her eyes were closed, and she moaned as she tried to turn her head. He leaned close to her and lifted her chin. Hello, Lise, he said softly. When she only moaned in return, he leaned over and kissed her. She gave a small whimper. You don't like that, huh? He mocked. Well, there's not a thing you can do about it. He grinned at her, hoping Marcus worked fast. He got out of the car and went around to her side, lifted her up into his arms, and carried her to the door. It's about time, Marcus spat as he opened the door. She's heavy, man, Glenn answered as he stumbled to the bed and let her drop. Dead weight, Marcus answered with a laugh. Glenn made a hurrying motion. Come on, let's get her clothes off her. Slow down, my friend. This stuff doesn't peak for a couple of hours. You need to slow down and enjoy it. There's no rush. You say that as if you've had plenty of practice. Oh, I've had some real good times with the pretty little girls in this town. He slowly made his way to the dresser and poured 2 shots of Jack and held one out to Glenn. To you, my friend, for a job well done. Glenn raised his glass. I'll drink to that. Chaz paid no attention to Joe when he turned to answer the phone by the cash register. It was the look on Joe's face when he turned back that told him something was up. Eyes glittering with intense anger, jaw set in stone, Joe slammed down the phone, reached up under the bar, and came up with a double-barrel 12-gauge shotgun, which he began loading. Chaz and Evan both jumped to their feet. Joe turned to Evan. Call Tyson. Get him over to the Magnolia. He turned and yelled to his cook. Hey, Marty, watch the place. What's happened? Chaz asked. I gotta go kill a man. Now, Joe, Chaz began. And you're coming with me, Joe interrupted. It's Lisa, and she's in trouble. Chaz bolted toward the door. New scene. Marcus had just started when his cell phone rang. He stood up and pulled the phone out of his pocket and eyed the number. I'd better take this, he said to Glenn, turning away. Glenn rolled his eyes, his impatience growing. Lisa moaned again. Her mouth was moving like she was trying to say something. He stood over her, watching her. You know what's happening, don't you, Lise? You know what we're getting ready to do, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. He chuckled. Marcus stuffed his phone back in his pocket. Something's come up. I have to go. You're kidding. You don't want to get yours real quick? I can't. It's urgent. He ran into the bathroom, grabbed a towel, and began moving around the room, wiping his prints from every surface. You make sure you do the same before you leave here, he ordered as if he actually cared. Don't worry about me, Glenn answered. He waited several minutes for Marcus to be gone before he turned his attention to Lisa. Well, this is better, he thought. He hadn't felt real comfortable about operating in front of another man. Leaning close, he grabbed her by the hair and gave a hard tug, and she stirred slightly and moaned again. I have you all to myself now. This is much better, don't you think? What should we do first, huh? His eyes lit up. I know what we'll do. He twisted her around so she lay straight in the bed, her head at the top, and then stood back and surveyed his work. The shoes have to go, he commented as he jerked each sandal off and tossed it toward the door. Now, let's see what we have in here, he muttered as he undid the snap of her jeans. She moaned and tossed her head. What, Lisa? Are you getting upset? You should be, but don't worry. I'm not going to start down here. Just getting you ready. She moaned softly, a sound that could have been a protest, but in Glenn's mind was one of pleasure. He touched her face. You know, you're the one that totally blew it, Lise. You should have been happy that I was chosen by your mother. There were lots of guys in the company who would have given anything to be in your mother's bed. If you had just kept your cool that day, none of this would be happening. You and I would be making a fortune. We would be getting ready to travel the world together. And yeah, you would have married me, and a few years later, we might have even popped out a few kids, though I could certainly do without that hassle. He sighed, gripped her face in his hand. But you just couldn't keep that temper from getting the best of you, could you? It's your fault, Lise. All your fault, and you deserve what you're about to get. Not that you'll remember it, but I will. I'm never going to forget this night. He let her go and rolled away, stood beside the bed. First things first, Lise, as Lou was so fond of saying. He knelt on the bed beside her. Sweat ran from his forehead as he tried to imagine that she was a willing participant in what he was about to do. His fingers trembled as he tugged on his zipper. He was so intent on what he was doing that the sound of the shotgun being chambered didn't register. Not at first. Yep, you heard it right. Go ahead, Joe said softly, nodding his head. Glenn gasped, his head jerking up to see a red-headed man looking down the side of a shotgun aimed right at his crotch. Go ahead, Joe said again, his voice deadly calm. Glenn raised his hands in the air. I don't want any trouble, okay? Oh, I'd say it's a little too late for that. The slowly spoken words came from a younger man standing beside the one with the rifle. Glenn smiled, trying to hide the fact that he was shaking like a leaf. Really, I don't know what you think you've walked in on, but this is all just a big misunderstanding. He motioned toward Lisa. She's my fiancée. We were just going to have a little fun, you know. We had some drinks at the bar and she passed out from drinking too much, and this is really a private thing between me and her. Chaz moved forward a few steps. That might work back in LA where nobody knows anybody else and everyone's worried about being sued. But it won't work here. You see, we know Lisa. You do? Everyone knows her, Chaz said. Drawing a deep breath and keeping his hands in the air, Glenn backed off the bed onto his own feet. Well, she's only been here about a month. How could everyone know her? You wouldn't understand. It's small town stuff. Everyone knows everyone, Joe answered, his finger caressing the trigger. But in this particular circumstance, Joe nodded toward Chaz. He's her neighbor, and me, well, I'm her father. Glenn swallowed hard. Her father? Yep, he's her father, Chaz answered with a smile, and I'm thinking he has the right to blow you away right now, but I'm going to ask him to hold off for a bit, 'cause I want some time to rip you apart with my bare hands. First. Glenn stepped back, the panic on his face evident. Now, Chaz, came a voice from just outside the door. I don't blame you for wanting to kill this guy, but I'm going to need you to step aside and let the law take over. Deputy Tyson Stewart stepped into the room, touched Joe's shoulder. You too, Joe. It took Joe a full minute before he lowered the gun and allowed the police to do their job. New scene. Just let me take her home, Chaz pleaded. She needs blood work done, Chaz, if you want the charges to stick, and then we need a lab test showing what's in her system, Tyson answered. Chaz ran a hand through his hair and knelt down beside Lisa where she lay on a stretcher. Robert and Tim, Chaz's paramedic friends, were getting ready to transport her. He knew what Tyson said was true, but the need to take her home and hold her until she woke was strong. Well, is she okay? They turned at the voice to find a petite young woman peering in the door with a glass of wine in her hand. Tyson went to her. She's okay. Thanks to you, Jenny. I wasn't sure what to do, but something just didn't seem right, you know, and I knew she was Joe's daughter. Heck, everyone knows that. And I watched that guy leave with her, and he didn't go out the drive. He swung around to the back of the motel, and I just had a feeling something was wrong, 'cause, like, I knew she and your brother were sort of an item. So I called Joe. Well, we can't thank you enough, Jenny, Chaz said as he joined Tyson. I second that, Tyson said sincerely. Jenny blushed, and smiling up at her old high school beau, she cleared her throat and changed the subject. So, what happened to the guy? He's been arrested and will be charged with attempted rape and with administering illegal substances. Wow. I should have known he was up to no good. He's been hanging out with Marcus. Really? Tyson asked. Anything else you can tell us? She shook her head. No, just that they've been together drinking at least 2 days earlier this week. I didn't hear anything they talked about, but Marcus was his usual obnoxious self. Well, if you can think of anything else, please let us know, okay? Jenny nodded. Will do. Well, I'd best be getting back to work, but I thought you might want to have this. She held the drink out to Tyson. It's her wine. She never even finished one glass. That's why I knew she couldn't have been drunk so quickly. I bet there's something in it. I bet you're right, Tyson said with a smile. Jenny, you're a great detective. She smiled. I'm glad I could help. Chaz turned to watch as they wheeled Lisa to the waiting ambulance, then looked over at Joe. Let's go, he said. How long will she be out? Joe asked as they drove. Well, if it's Rofinol, it peaks about 2 hours after ingestion, but it will take her probably 8 hours to sleep it off. 8 hours, Joe shook his head. Thank God Jenny called me. Chaz nodded. He intended to do just that. I wanted to kill him, Joe said. Chaz cocked his head. You had your chance before Tyson arrived. You should have done it. I would have backed you up. Joe eyed Chaz. Remind me to never cross you. Chaz smiled. New scene. Her head was going to explode. She was just sure of it. Her eyelids felt like sandpaper and her stomach roiled. What was she? What happened? Where was she? Deciding to take the chance that letting light into her eyes won't cause her to disintegrate, she opened them the tiniest slit. And first thing she focused on was Grams, asleep in a chair. She moved her head slightly to the left and saw her father leaning against a wall, speaking with his wife. Megan stood nearby. Moving her head all the way to the left was her mistake. She moaned with the pain, and shutting her eyes tight, someone took her hand. Lisa? She smiled at the sound of the voice. It belonged to the man she loved. Chaz, she whispered. Where am I? What happened? There was the sound of footsteps, and Lisa tried again to open her eyes, and when she did, she saw 5 beautiful faces peering down at her. You're in the hospital, sweetheart. Again? They all laughed. Yes, again, Chaz answered. Do you remember what happened? She closed her eyes. No, I was... Her eyes flew open. I was at the bar, the one at the motel. I was having a drink with Glenn. Yes, and we'll talk more about that decision privately, but for now, what else do you remember? She shook her head. I don't remember anything else. I had a glass of wine, and then I wasn't feeling well, and then she drew a breath and held it and let it out. Everything is a blank. Chaz leaned over and brushed her hair from her forehead. It's just as well. What happened? Why am I here in the hospital? Grams took her hand. How are you feeling, dear? Well, I have a major headache. Will someone please tell me what happened? Megan moved forward. That butt-wipe ex-fiancé of yours drugged you and took you to his motel room. Lisa's mouth moved to form words, but nothing came out. Her eyes welled up with tears. He didn't succeed, Shirley said quickly, thanks to Joe and Chaz. She looked up at Chaz as a tear fell over onto her cheek. Joe stroked her hair and spoke softly. He put Rofinol in your wine, sweetheart. He took you to his room. Jenny was suspicious and called me. Chaz and I got there just in time. Where is he now? Well, if I had my way, he'd be dead and buried, Chaz said, but Tyson arrived in time to keep me from going to jail. They arrested him, Graham said, but he's already out on bond. Yeah, Tyson says Marcus posted his bond, and that makes me sick, Megan said with vengeance. Marcus, Lisa asked. How does Marcus know Glenn? Well, we don't quite know that yet. Lisa was silent as she considered the news. Finally, she looked up. Maybe it's like a Hate Lisa club. Well, now, that's just nonsense, Graham said. He tricked me. You'd think I'd be smarter than that. What made you agree to have a drink with him, Lisa? Joe asked. She glanced up at Chaz's narrowed eyes before she answered. He called and asked me to forgive him. And Grams and I had just had a talk about forgiveness, and he said he'd driven all the way across the country because of guilt and wanted to start fresh. It was supposed to be a drink for old time's sake, a ritual to begin the new and improved Glenn. I can't believe I fell for it. You wouldn't have if you'd taken the time to speak with any one of us, Chaz said. Lisa sighed. Like I said, Grams and I had just had a conversation about forgiveness, and then he called, and it just seemed like it was what I was supposed to do. Oh, dear Lisa, I'm so sorry. I'm responsible. Nonsense, Shirley said. Joe nodded. A body can forgive a person without putting themselves in danger. I'm so sorry, Lisa whispered. It's okay, dear. You just get well. How long have I been in the hospital? Well, we got you here last night, just before midnight. It's now 9 in the morning. You were out a long time. I'm just glad you're awake now, Joe said. I've caused you all so much trouble. Your family, Lisa. You're not trouble, Shirley said softly. That's right, the others said together, simultaneously, causing laughter. That's right, Chaz said again, close to her ear. You have a large and wonderful family, and we all love you and care about you. And you're all here for me. Well, of course we are, Graham said. It's amazing. That's what home and family is all about, Lisa. Chaz, Lisa said, sitting up straighter, I want you to know that this has nothing to do with what you just said, but I think I'm going to be sick. Joe grabbed a plastic basin and Shirley wet a washcloth, and Chaz supported her back, and Grams held her hair out of the way while Lisa retched. Luckily, there wasn't much on her stomach. Well, now, that was lovely, Megan said, with false cheerfulness, making everyone laugh again. Should we call a doctor? Grams asked. Well, the vomiting is a symptom of the drug, Chaz answered. But what say we get a doc in here so he can sign her out of here? They only want to keep her until she regained consciousness. Well, she's conscious. He leaned down and kissed Lisa's forehead. Would you like to go home? Home, she smiled. Most definitely. New scene. You must be kidding. I knew Glenn was a donkey's behind, but I never figured him for a criminal. Oh, my gosh, I can't believe all the stuff that's happened to you since you've been there. I know it's crazy, Jody. Are you having second thoughts about coming? Well, since we're already in Mississippi, it's a little late to turn back. No, really. John and I can't tell you how much we're looking forward to doing this. It's such a crazy adventure, coming to a new world, starting a new business, meeting all new people. I am totally psyched. I was hoping you'd say that. I had to give you a chance to opt out, though, because of the danger. Oh, please, Lisa. I'm not a bit worried. I am woman, hear me roar. And as for John, he was special forces. There's not much that scares him. So, what time tomorrow do you think you'll be here? Well, John says we'll be there early afternoon. I'm so excited to see you. Me too. I'll just be happy to get there. It's been a lonely drive with John in his car towing your car and me in my car towing a trailer full of stuff. It's hard to stay awake. So tell me some juicy stuff about this guy, Chaz. That should keep me awake for a while. Well, I'm in love with him. Totally cool. Does he know? Oh, yes. Are you ready for the details? New scene. Lisa's eyes flew open. Turning her head slowly, she glanced at the clock. 1 a.m. Her stomach gripped with panic as she realized something woke her. She hadn't really heard anything. It was more a sense, a prickly feeling at the back of her neck that someone was nearby, standing over her. She had to fight the panic. Her heart was a drum in her ear. Someone is here in my room, she thought. How did he get in past the alarm? And would he kill her this time because she hadn't heeded the warning? Quietly and slowly, she reached toward the nightstand drawer and pulled it open. She closed her eyes in gratitude as her fingers closed around the solid, cold metal of her tiny gun. But she had no time to react when the large hand closed around hers, and another clapped over her mouth, and his head lowered to whisper in her ear, Lisa, you with a gun is hot. He moved his hand from her mouth and replaced it with his lips. When he finally pulled away, she struggled against his strength. Chaz, you scared me to death. He held her still easily as he pulled the gun from her hand, placed it back in the drawer, and gently pushed it closed. Sorry. What are you going to do about it? Let me go and you'll see. I'm going to make you sorry you came in here trying to frighten me. He chuckled. I wasn't trying to frighten you, but you can keep fighting me, Lisa, because this is also hot. He kissed her mouth again until her mock struggle ceased as she sank into oblivion. That was all I thought it would be. She laughed. Shh, Chaz said with a soft laugh. You'll wake Maddie, and she'll come up here to check on you, and this could prove to be a little embarrassing, what with me in your room in the middle of the night. She rose up to look at him. He had on jeans and nothing else. Her eyes moved over him, noting the wiry hair on his stomach, his muscular chest, the curve of his biceps. So what are you doing here? Lisa asked. I was lying there in bed, only a few feet from you, and all I could think about was coming in here and kissing you. Well, that's a good way to get shot. Yeah, I remembered the gun at the last second. Lucky for me, you're a little slow on the draw. They were silent for several moments. It was Lisa who finally broke the silence. What are you thinking about? He sighed. Actually, I was thinking that I'm grateful I didn't have any episodes while sneaking in here. Oh. And I was thinking that the more we do this, maybe the better it will be, as far as the flashbacks. That's a good theory. I'd like to test it. He stroked her arm. We will. But for now, let's talk about something else. Okay, like what? Like, why would you consent to see Glenn after he beat you up in our front yard? Oh, that. Yes, that. Did you think I would just forget about it? I hoped. Why, Lisa? Had you not had enough? You knew he was capable of violence towards you. She huffed out a breath. He called and was all pitiful, and Lou fired him, and he said he was trying to make a fresh start and he needed my forgiveness. It was just a drink for old time's sake. Chaz shook his head. Women and their soft hearts. I don't have to tell you what he was going to do. She shrugged. No, I don't think so. The thought of something hurting you, Lisa, physically or emotionally, it makes me crazy. I'm sorry, Chaz. Did you think before you left to have drinks for old time's sake that maybe you should let me know where you were going? She rose up in protest, but he stopped her. Not that you have to answer to me or check with me about anything. Of course you don't. Logically, though, you love me. I love you, and someone has threatened your life. I think you should have called me before you went out alone to a bar. Logically, he was right, and honestly, she'd purposely not called him. I thought about it, she finally answered. His eyes narrowed. But you didn't because you knew I'd freak? When she didn't answer, he rolled over next to her. You deliberately snuck off knowing I would be mad. Yes, she admitted with a mischievous grin. I did. So I guess this means I can't trust you. No matter what I think, you'll do what you want anyway. That, she said as she snuggled closer, is exactly what it means. He gave a soft laugh. Okay, well, I'm glad we got that straight. Me too, Lisa said softly. And that is the end of chapter 14.